I'm Austin Carty, and I am the pastor at Boulevard Baptist Church here in Anderson.
Now, why in the world did you come to Anderson, South Carolina?
I'm delighted to be in Anderson, South Carolina. When we first began conversation with Boulevard, it seemed like the kind of church community that we wanted to serve. Anderson seems like the kind of community that we want to be living in and involved in. Wonderful schools for our children to go to, a committed civic structure. It's the size of a city that we wanted to live in. It's back closer to home for both my wife April and myself. So really, if we were to put on paper the kind of community that we wanted to live in and the geographical location we wanted to live in, Anderson is right there, checking off all those marks.
Well, let's talk about your journey here. How did y'all end up here? You said it's closer to home. Where's home, and how did y'all get to Anderson?
So I'm originally from High Point, North Carolina. My wife is from Hendersonville, North Carolina, just barely an hour down the road. And we were in Corbin, Kentucky, which is in the southeastern corner of the state. We were there a little over 4 years at a wonderful church, First Baptist Church there in Corbin. And what happened was I had a friend in the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship who knew that ultimately April and I would like to land somewhere a little bit closer to Hendersonville, particularly in upstate South Carolina. And they knew about Boulevard's opening and reached out to me and said, this is a church you might want to look at. And so I did, and loved everything that I saw, loved the way the church presented itself, loved its history of engagement with the local community and the mission-oriented, the mission-minded orientation that the church has. Loved the way that the church worships. It's very similar to the style of worship that I like to lead. And so the church looked really good from what we saw. So I reached out to a few mentors who knew a little bit more about the church, who all said, yeah, this is a great church with a great history. You'd do well to apply to this church. And with each passing conversation with the representatives of the church, the more it seemed like this was the place to be.
Is this the first time you followed a pastor who was here a long time?
This is the first time I've directly followed a minister who's been in place for a long time. The church that I'm coming from had a legendary minister that had been there for about 25 years, but there were two pastors in between him and myself. So following Johnny McKinney here at Boulevard, this is the first time I'll follow somebody who has a long and storied tenure in my church.
He's always been active in the community. Is that going to be part of what you want to do here, is being active in the community?
Absolutely. I hope that in any church that I serve, and certainly shown up here at Boulevard and in Anderson, to be able to be very active in the life of the community, not just in the life of the community within my church, but in the larger community as well.
Now, did you grow up in church?
I did, yes. I grew up in a non-denominational church, and then went to seminary, and along the way...
Well, you skipped a lot there.
Yes.
You grew up in church. What made you want to go to seminary, and where'd you go to college?
So I did my undergrad at High Point University. I worked for a while as a freelance writer. That doesn't mean I was successful. It just means that I was barely paying the bills by being able to write.
Nobody appreciates writing. Everybody thinks they can write.
I tell you, I have the deepest appreciation for all writers, and I love the written word. I'm an avid reader. I taught high school English for a few years, and it was actually while teaching a Leo Tolstoy short story that I felt the call to ministry. That's a much longer
That makes perfect
story.
sense to me, actually.
And you know, a lot of people ask you when you're a pastor, when did you receive your call to ministry and what did that look like? And when I answer, well, I was teaching a Leo Tolstoy short story, people tend to look at me very strangely. That's not the answer that people tend to get when asking that question, but it's my experience. And
those people haven't read Tolstoy.
That's exactly it. That's exactly
it. Short story. His religious imagery and his take on God is deep and wide, and a lot of his stuff.
Tolstoy is one of, if not my very favorite writer. Anna Karenina is one of those that you could read and keep rereading over and over again, and there's so many deep spiritual lessons in it. But yeah, you could talk about Tolstoy and all kinds of different
things. So you were a
things.
high school teacher, you read this, you felt the call to ministry.
Yep.
And so you went from there and went to seminary?
Went to seminary at Wake Forest University.
What did you study there?
So I studied a lot of theology and philosophy there, and pastoral care.
And what was your first church out of there?
First Baptist Corbin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, there's some other things that I've been told about you. Let's talk about Survivor.
Yeah, sure.
When were you on Survivor, and let's talk about what happened there.
Oh, in a whole different lifetime.
What made you want to be on Survivor?
Well, if I'm being honest, the reason I wanted to be on Survivor was that I wanted to win $1 million,
Of course.
and I wanted to be on television. I was 24 years old. In so many ways, I was a completely different person then. But it was a wonderful experience. It feels like, in some ways, I dreamed that experience. It was 39 days of, well, for me, it was 21 days of being out on an island, starving, being eaten alive by bugs. And then the next thing you know, it was over, and it was on television, and I look back on it now as a wonderful, wonderful memory. And I'm always happy to talk about the show. I don't often bring it up unless somebody knows about it. One of the things about being a minister who was on Survivor is that if people know about it, you spend the next 3 years trying to not be the pastor who was on Survivor. It's nice to first be the minister and find out, oh, he was on Survivor. It usually doesn't work in that sequence, but I did have a wonderful experience with the show, and so anytime anybody wants to ask me about it, I always love to talk about it.
Is it different than it's portrayed on the final cuts and all?
It's not really. Obviously there's editorial work that goes into the show, but that's not the same as editorial manipulation. They've got 72 hours of real-time footage for every 42-minute episode they put together. So obviously you have to condense what you have, and you're trying to tell a story at the same time. But my experience, and I can only speak for my one season, but my experience was that everybody was pretty much portrayed as they came off on the island. Those who complain about their edits, and across all seasons there are that. At least from my own experience, those who complain about their edits might not have a whole lot of self-awareness of what they were like on the island itself. But otherwise, it's like what you see. Here's what I always say: it's as close as you could ever simulate the experience of being stranded on an island. You're not going to die, but the starvation's real, the exhaustion's real, and it's a really, really wild experience.
And so after you're voted out, you just have to stick around until it's all over? Is that
Yeah, so when you're voted out of the show, then you're taken to a location where you're held, and if you're on the jury, which I was, then you come back every 3 nights to be a part of that, because ultimately you're in the group that votes on who wins the show.
And okay, I'm not going to keep talking about Survivor.
Yeah, it's okay.
But that isn't interesting.
Yeah.
I think you're the first person in Anderson. Some other people who have I know applied but not gotten on the
Well,
show.
so here's the thing, and I was told this by a member, and I can't tell you whether this is true or not, but we live in an age where we don't usually do a whole lot of verification of things anyway, so why not? Why not just throw out crazy claims? But I was told that a delightful woman who was on my season, named Ruth Marie, is originally from Anderson.
She is, yeah, the Tollies.
Yeah.
So I Tolly furniture downtown, yeah.
I didn't know that,
okay.
And I haven't spoken to Ruth Marie in, 15 years. But she was wonderful,
right?
And I thought and still think the world.
She moved away by the time the Carty family is very well.
I didn't know that until just the other day.
Okay, a small world.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your family.
Yeah.
You got 2 kids?
I have 3 kids. I have. So right when all this began in earnest with Boulevard, when we accepted the candidacy for the position, right at that time, our 3rd child, our son Whit, was born. So it's been a very hectic 11 weeks at our house. So we have a daughter, Ada, who will be turning 6 in September. We have a daughter, Juliana, who just turned 4. And we have Whit, our son, who is 11 weeks old.
Wow. That's a lot of transition at one time.
It's a whole lot.
How are you and your wife holding up in all this?
We're doing very little sleeping, and we're in pure survival mode, but we're making it.
School starts to help a little.
That will help, and we'll see. We're trying to just get to some semblance of normalcy and get a routine going. We just got our belongings here Saturday. As you can see, all of my stuff from my office is still in boxes. It's the same way at our house. But in the next couple of weeks, we intend to start trying to create a little bit of a routine.
And I know it's early and you're still meeting with people here, but what are some of your visions for what can happen here at Boulevard with you as pastor?
Well, it's still early to speak practically.
That's what I'm saying. I know
yeah.
you haven't had a chance to meet with all the people who are here,
Yeah.
but I mean, just in general terms, what kind of things would you like to see?
Well, I'd love to see Boulevard continue to be active and involved in the local community, and serving the least of these, and being a source of love and light here at the corner of Boulevard and the world. One of the things that I've found here in the Boulevard community in just my few short weeks here, and also in my weekend that I was here for my trial sermon, was it's a very warm community. They have been very, very gracious and welcoming to April and me and the kids. There's a level of thoughtfulness that exists in the culture here that's very important. I think the worship is a thoughtful service. The people in the pews are thoughtful people, and I think that's a really, really wonderful thing here in the church. And I love the way that this church is rooted and has always been engaged, like I say, in the life of Anderson. And I hope that we can continue to extend that and build on that.
Let's just talk more philosophically. What do you think the role of the church is now? It certainly is changing and shifting, and all the studies you see about millennials is they don't dislike the church. They just think, why bother?
Yeah.
What's the point? They don't have negative feelings. They think it's irrelevant. What do you think the role of the church is moving ahead in light of some of this kind of stuff?
Well, I think there are lots of really important conversations to be had about why church is relevant, why what it is that the church's mission is in the world and in the local community. I think one of the things that's really, really important is taking Jesus's words in the Lord's Prayer seriously, that we want to make it more on earth as it is in heaven. And that can seem like such an overwhelming and impossible task, which it is. But when we think about it just here in our local community, right here in the little corner of the globe that we are situated in, how can we make it just a little bit more in Anderson as it is in heaven? And I think that people of all generations, and even those who are wondering about the relevance and meaning of the church, can get behind that sense of mission, that there's an objective to what the church is doing in the local community. And when you can attach that kind of spiritual significance to it, I think that it puts an even deeper sense of gravity on an impulse that some people have of just wanting to do justice and love and love mercy and walk humbly in the community. But when you can couple that with doing that in the name of Christ, there's a gravity to that I think we have an opportunity to talk about and inspire folks here in the Anderson community.
Yeah, I run into a lot of people that they want to talk about what they believe or their dogma I always try to shift it to what are you doing to make the community better. If each person has something in front of them, no matter how small it may seem to them, if they can. And people who can't come up with anything, I say we have nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to engage in discussion if you're not interested in helping the community.
I said in my trial sermon, I opened it by quoting Fyodor Dostoevsky, who in his masterpiece, The Idiot, has a line that says that beauty will save the world. And I connected that with the way that those who first approached Jesus were asking him what he was up to and where he was going. And he said, come and see. It wasn't some theological treatise. It wasn't, here, get all this information right, and then maybe we'll go and try to make the world a better place. It's just come and see. And I think that that's the kind of mentality that has to be in place in the church for the church to look like it has any real purchase on truth and on value and significance, people need to be able to come and see that there is actually something happening, that there's important work being done. If it's just a bunch of words about love and joy and kindness and goodness, that doesn't mean anything. Somebody has to see something in order to then want to be a part of it, him or herself. One of my favorite writers, a guy named Donald Miller, and in the beginning of a book of his called Blue Like Jazz, he has this great bit where he says that he didn't used to like jazz music, but then one night he watched a man play the saxophone with his eyes closed for 15 minutes, after which he loved jazz music. And he has this great line where he says, sometimes you have to watch someone else love something before you can love it yourself. It's almost as if they are showing you the way. My hope for us as Boulevard Baptist Church, and my hope for the church worldwide, is that we won't just be a whole bunch of talk about love and service and taking care of our brothers and our sisters, but that we would actually be out actively doing that, to where people who've only ever heard talk about that, who have no real interest in it, suddenly see those words taking on flesh and suddenly say, I didn't see it, but now I do. I didn't love that, but now I do. I didn't want to be a part of that, but now I do. And I think we have that opportunity here at Boulevard Baptist Church.
And to make a call back, it's in Tolstoy where he's reading the gilded scriptures and the light comes through the stained glass windows. And
yes.
He before we started this interview, we were just chatting. Let's talk about the role of the fruit of the Spirit. We're just talking about people going to Scripture and trying to find things that Jesus talked about. It seems like Matthew 25 and the two passages that have fruit of the Spirit list seem to sort of encapsulate everything he taught.
Yeah.
And you were saying that's an important part of what you...
A lodestar verse and a philosophical, theological orientation for me as a minister is in Galatians 5, when Paul lists what he calls the fruit of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, goodness. Those are sometimes translated. Gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. To me, those are, if we want to call them virtues, attributes, characteristics, adjectives by which we would want people to describe us, nouns that we would like to inhabit in our person. However you want to talk about these fruits of the Spirit. No one has ever said, "Oh, I don't like that loving person. I don't like that joyful person. I don't like that patient person." I think that these are fruits of a Spirit that are exemplary and that, when modeled, draw people to their source. And thus, my benediction, and has been this for years as a minister, my benediction is to say, Paul says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then say, as he says in Galatians 5, may we live by the Spirit. If we can begin to do more and more of that as a church here at Boulevard Baptist and as a church universal, then more and more people are going to actually see that there's some substance to what otherwise are just words.
How important do you think it is, given obviously certain boundaries, that the churches here work together for these things you're talking about? Because we do have a lot of people in Anderson doing really good things for these least of these kind of populations we're talking about.
I think that the spirit of ecumenical dialogue and partnership is vital. I think that it's one of the strangest and most antithetical things to the gospel that churches have historically been territorial and operated in silos and not wanted to work together. I think that if we really believe what we profess to believe about the importance of the Christian gospel and the significance of taking care of one another in Christ's name, then A, we ought not worry who's getting the credit for it, and B, we should recognize that the more hands that we have working together, the more important work that can be done.
Let's talk about, if people want to know more about Boulevard Baptist Church, where should they go and find that information?
So to find more about Boulevard Baptist Church, you can go to boulevardbaptist.com, or you can find the Boulevard Baptist Church information on Facebook as well.
And what time are your services if people want to come out and see the new pastor?
We would love to have people come out and worship with us on Sunday mornings. You can join us. Sunday school starts at 9:15, and worship services are at 10:30.